All right, well, again, thank you for being with us, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to have you with us. My name is Dan Worry. I am the Senior Director of Early Learning at the Hunt Institute in Durham, North Carolina, and we are so glad to have you with us. If this is your first Hunt Institute program, know that we are founded by the four-term governor of North Carolina, Jim Hunt, and we serve as an education policy support to governors and state lawmakers and other high-level state elected leaders. We cover the full educational spectrum from prenatal through workforce, but for the purposes of our conversation today, we will be very much focused on the years of early childhood. We know that the research is clear that high quality early childhood education has lifelong social and academic and economic impacts. But we also know that leadership practices, whether in a child care center or a public school or a state department of education, all directly affect the culture and the climate of early childhood programs, to include their teaching practices and the level of engagement of families, which in turn all impact the development and learning of our young children. Not long ago, there was a great article the National Association for the Education of Young Children published on leadership in early childhood. They mentioned Jack Welch, who you may know was the former CEO of General Electric. And in his autobiography, Winning, he had this wonderful quote, said, "Before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. But when you become a leader, success is about growing others." And that really is what our conversation is about today. While the business of early childhood is about growing children, leaders in the field also need to focus on shared leadership with families and professionals all throughout the workforce. And we are so lucky today to have a panel from the state of Alabama where this is being talked about not only in words, but in practice. They are living out this model of shared leadership in early childhood. And so we're so delighted to introduce you to our panelists. First, I want to introduce you to Dr. Barbara Cooper, who is the Secretary of the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education. Dr. Cooper, it's great to have you with us. Judy Jablon is the Executive Director of Leading for Children, and those of you who have worked in the field of early childhood for any length of time know Judy's work, starting with work sampling on back. Judy is one of those amazing longtime advocates in the field, and somebody that I am personally grateful to think of as a teacher. We are joined by Joseph Warren, who is a teacher at a Head Start program at the Alabama Organized Community Action Program, who has been involved in the coaching project that we'll be talking about today, and by Amy Brooks, who is a coach facilitator at the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education. It's so great to have all of you with us. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Secretary Cooper, I want to begin with you. Governor Ivey appointed you as the Secretary of Early Childhood Education back in July of 2020, so almost a full year now as Secretary. Dr. Cooper has over 30 years of education experience and has worked on the birth to workforce continuum. Prior to serving as Secretary, she served as the Director of the Department's Office of School Readiness, and in this capacity, she administered the first class pre-K program in Alabama, which you may know has been recognized over the past 15 years by the National Institute for Early Education Research at Rutgers University as the nation's top quality pre-K program. Secretary Cooper, it's great to have you with us, and as always, great to see you. Would you start us off by sharing a little bit of background on how we came to this conversation? How did Alabama get involved with this innovative partnership with Judy and her organization, Leading for Children, and why has it been important to focus on coaching as a lever for building shared leadership within the early childhood system in Alabama? Oh, Dr. Cooper, you're muted.
Thank you so much, Dan, for this opportunity, and certainly to the Hunt Institute for all of the work that you've been supporting the department with. And our department has a knack for getting involved in innovative partnerships, but this one is very special for us. In September of 2018, leaders at the Department of Early Childhood Education met to actually review how we were progressing with our department's first-class pre-K coaches models and how we were actually implementing the program and the coaching that was being provided. We recognized that we really wanted to take a look at what was happening with our strength-based parallel model of coaching. We certainly had a lot of evidence that indicated that there was quality improvement happening based on class in our first class pre-K classrooms and other programs where the Alabama Reflective Coaching Model was in place. We saw growth and improvement, but we were not quite progressing at the desired pace that we wanted to be progressing with the department. We recognized that many coaching practices represented more of a fix-it culture based on deficits rather than actually having a strength-based, ideas-based model. This collaborative effort has been critical in really helping us to see what the importance is of having support happening at all levels of the organization and those collaborative conversations happening at all levels. Due to the experience that we've had working with Judy Jablin on our actual coaching practices and really becoming focused and honed in there, we reached out to Leading for Children and asked them to support us and provide some guidance around actually using principles from the book that Judy authored, Coaching with Powerful Interactions. Several members of our team had an opportunity to review the principles that were in Coaching with Powerful Interactions and recognize that there were many opportunities there for us to improve here in Alabama around our coaching projects. So we've had many wonderful products actually come out of this interaction, including a video project that supports us with not only our new teachers, but returning teachers. And what's so powerful about this particular product is that these are videos made by Alabama's educators in Alabama's classrooms. So to have products and things that are actually put together with the various levels of teachers and coaches has really proven a powerful opportunity for us to grow in the area of coaching.
Secretary Cooper, thank you. And Judy, let's turn to you. As I mentioned, you are the founder and the executive director of Leading for Children, which is a nonprofit organization that is working in communities across the country to help support the best early learning experiences possible, but while also creating environments where educators thrive. Dr. Cooper mentioned one of your prior books. You have written a number of them, including the newest, 5 Commitments of Optimistic Leaders for Young Children. I know I want to hear about the book, but I was so intrigued, when Dr. Cooper talked about how coaching used to be sort of focused on this fix-it model. Talk a little bit about why building leadership in early childhood is important and how this kind of shared leadership model differs from the fix-it model. And Judy, you're muted as well.
Thanks, Dr. Cooper. That was really wonderful to listen to. And Dan, thanks for inviting me. It's really wonderful to be on this panel with all of you, and especially Mr. Warren and Ms. Brooks, who I have had the joy and privilege of working with over the last 2 years. So I'm going to start by saying I've been in the field a long time. And each effort that we've made, first with assessment, the work on, the work sampling system, creating a comprehensive assessment to support teachers in really looking carefully at children. And then we wrote The Power of Observation to help teachers really think about observing children. And then the book Powerful Interactions, and then Coaching with Powerful Interactions. And I see them as stepping stones, as that they addressed high need. In retrospect, they were missing a key ingredient. And the key ingredient is an ingredient that I think has been left out of our dialogue, and that's the individual. who is this person who is responsible for all these relationships? So I'm excited about the book, Optimistic Leadership, the work we're doing in Alabama, because our movement is to really build a nation of optimistic leaders for children. And we believe that that's how we can advance early learning equity and strengthen the workforce. An optimistic leader owns her purpose or his purpose. Got to keep Mr. Warren in the mix here. They see a path forward and they persist even when faced with challenges. And if we just pause there and think about how often there's this, it's too hard, or I haven't been able to forge a partnership, or I don't get along with my coach, or I don't get along with my teaching assistant, or my supervisor doesn't understand me, or my director doesn't understand me. But relationships are reciprocal. And it isn't that somebody doesn't understand me, it's that maybe I don't understand what I don't understand about me. And so this notion of embracing our role as leaders and that we have to share that leadership is pivotal. To me, optimistic leadership is kind of hope and persistence combined, knowing that you can see that path, but when the going gets tough, you're willing to hang in. One of the commitments, the first commitment, is think impact to make informed decisions. Well, every person on this panel has heard about intentional teaching, intentional leadership, intentional decision-making. But when we think about that, are we really asking people to have conversations about what you want your impact to be? What your purpose is? What's your why? Do we have pre-service classes about why are you choosing this profession? Do we do staff meetings in programs where we invite people to reevaluate the reason they're in this profession? Well, to me, we have to have shared leadership rooted in shared purpose, rooted in this idea that we have to have hope and faith and optimism that we are growing the next generation of leaders. So for me, I felt like we had to move to a place, and Alabama's been an amazing partner at this, of saying it's not just about the methods. It's not just about the techniques. It's not just about the fidelity of the implementation. It's about the person. And that the person has to take that hard look inside and ask themselves, am I showing up effectively for children? Am I showing up effectively for my colleagues? We have to understand that that internal effort and a focus on that internal effort leads to external transformation and quality in systems. If we can't regulate our own behavior, how are we supposed to support the social emotional development of kids? You know, think about the tension in agencies, in programs, in classrooms between two teachers. That's called dysregulation, and children are watching it all the time. But imagine if the adult-to-adult interactions that children witnessed were healthy and respectful, and then people could really talk out their differences and acknowledge what it means to show up well. Marian Wright Edelman says, you can't be what you can't see. Imagine if young children were surrounded by adults who see themselves as optimistic leaders. What would it be like for every child in every community to be able to see themselves reflected in every adult at all levels who are respected, who are treated with respect and respect others, who have a sense of agency and can positively impact others? So we say equity for children begins with equity for all the adults, and that's why we wrote this book. And we believe that if people can practice these commitments and cultivate their wisdom, collaborate in new and healthier ways across roles, I think we're on a path. In Alabama, we are using these commitments to explore equitable learning partnerships. Coach to teacher, coach to coach, supervisor to coach, teacher to teacher, and teachers with families. Think about what we would be modeling for children.
Judy, thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about how this does play out in practice in Alabama. Amy Brooks is a coach facilitator for first class pre-K in Alabama. Amy, talk to us a little bit about your role and how the project with Leading for Children has changed how you work with the coaches that are working out across the state, and how they in turn are working with teachers.
Thank you first for having me. I'm honored to sit alongside all of these wonderful partners. When in reflecting about my role, I think number one, my role is to help give 4-year-olds the tools that they need to be resilient and successful in their journey in life, wherever that takes them. And so my piece in helping make this happen is walking alongside our pre-K coaches across the state. And as I walk alongside of them, I hope to shine a light on their strengths. And I hope to be a thinking partner as they journey and grow and think about setting goals and how to support their teachers. And so in walking alongside them in this manner, I'm modeling how they should show up for teachers, and then how teachers can show up for their students. So it's part of the parallel process. And in working with Leading for Children, I don't even know really where to begin how much I've grown. And I was blessed enough to, as I started this role as coach facilitator, our work with Leading for Children was beginning. I think one of my first days on the job was working on the video project. And what a wonderful experience that was to watch Leading for Children give teachers a voice across the state. And everywhere they went, the wisdom that the teachers held within inside of them was highlighted. And that was a beautiful, beautiful blessing to begin my job. And so in thinking, I think one of the biggest ways that I have been impacted is I'm a natural encourager. I really want to see everyone succeed and do their best. But my work with Leading for Children has given me the tools to think about the manners in which I'm doing that. Because I think before I would have walked into a classroom and probably looked at what a teacher maybe wasn't doing that great, or what I thought she could do better. And that would be our focus. And I probably would have encouraged her to get better at the thing that she was really weak at. But now I'm learning, and I help others learn, that we're going to walk in and we're going to notice what they're doing well. What is their strength? And when we focus on their strengths and we shine a light on that, they are in turn able to see that for themselves. And what you focus on, you're going to get more of. And the second piece is, after we shine a light on that, then we're going to raise their awareness, and we're going to talk about why that's important and how that impacts children, so that they'll know the purpose in their work, and they're going to be more willing and have the desire to do this more. So then we're going to increase this strength across the classroom. So that is probably the biggest thing that I've learned in my work with Leading for Children. As listening to Judy, you're always going to learn and grow. And working with this department, as Dr. Cooper talked about, we're always doing, leading innovative projects. But I think that's the biggest thing, because we all want to shine a light. We all need to know and hear what we're doing well and why that matters. And when we can walk away with that, then we're going to grow.
Amy, thank you. Joseph, I want to bring you into this conversation, but I want to preface by just saying, you and I have only had a chance to meet really over the past week or so, but I feel like I know you from watching the Leading for Children videos. For a Head Start teacher, and as a former kindergarten teacher myself, I just want to recognize, first off, I can't wait to visit your classroom, and just am always thrilled to see another man in early childhood teaching. So it's just great to have you with us. Talk to us a little bit about sort of how this looks from your perspective in the classroom. You've had a chance, obviously, to participate in this video series, now in the Learning Network. You've worked with the coaches that Amy is talking about in your classroom. How does this play out in your Head Start classroom, and what impact has it had on your approach to teaching? Not only teaching the children you're working with, but their families.
First of all, I'd like to give a thank you, Mr. Dan, the Hunting Institute, and Dr. Barbara Cooper, and Jan, and Ms. Amy for being a part of this platform. I really, really admire the leader of the children because it really gave me strength of who I was really is, and it gave me an insight of Mr. Warren and how to be a more learning experience with the parents and with the coaches. But when I first started teaching, I had the knowledge of communicating, but not to communicate with the parents and the children. I had to learn how to shift my mindset. And by working with the leader of the children, it reflects me to share the platform, and it reflects me how to become a more strength in communication and communicate, and how to be a better leader with my coach, and how we can work together as it can become one, and we can all be on the same accord, the same page of how we can just communicate better and how we can shift the learning platform for our kids.
Joseph, are there ways that you would point to that you're seeing maybe that communication is happening differently between you as the classroom teacher and the families that you're working with? Are there things that you have changed about your classroom because of this project?
Yes, I can really see a major change, and really with this year due to the pandemic, how we communicate more with the parents and how we just make them feel part of the classroom. It's not just our classroom, it's our classroom, the parents, the children, and the co-teacher and the whole staff. And we just share the platform by doing that communication and communicating with them on how we can build up how the learning strategies from the school level, from back to the home level.
That's great. We have talked, I think even on this webinar series in the past about, I think that may be one of the silver linings of the pandemic amidst, so much sadness and loss experienced by so many families. Some good things have happened during the pandemic as well. And, one of those is, as Joseph was mentioning, that I think that this bond between families and schools has really been strengthened, and that frankly, the technology is helping to play a role in bringing them together. So, it's my ongoing wish that and hope that, as we maybe start to emerge, hopefully, from the pandemic, that, that we don't lose sight of that. Because how exciting to talk with programs who are saying, even during the pandemic, we feel like these bonds are growing stronger and stronger.
Can I offer a question to Mr. Warren as well? Because Mr. Warren, you talked so eloquently about this in the webinar that you did with Leading for Children about the concept of shared leadership and how it's affecting the way you are with your children in your classroom and the way in which you create opportunities to share leadership with them. Can you talk a little about that?
We can share more of just letting the children have their voice, and we can sit and let them be the voice, and we can follow their lead, because children have a lot to say too. And sometimes we as the educators and the teachers, we're always doing this communicating, we're always to lead them. But sometimes the kids want to come in and we just follow their lead, and they can really, really grow in more enhancement of learning when you're just letting them have their voice because they want to be heard.
That notion of following the lead is a really wonderful construct in shared leadership, I think.
Absolutely. Secretary Cooper, I wanted to ask you, it's interesting as we think about, I referenced the first class pre-K's success over the past 15 years as recognized by NEAR. When you think about that NEAR report card, it has a set of indicators that are largely structural kinds of indicators, right? About the the qualifications of teachers and some of those sorts of characteristics. And Alabama is one of the only states in the country, I think one of three, if I'm remembering correctly, that meets all of the near benchmarks. But on top of that, I mean, it's just been so interesting to me as we've been preparing for this conversation to think about how this coaching piece maybe isn't fully reflected in that grading system. But, to me in Alabama, sounds like, in some ways that this is the secret ingredient that maybe hasn't been talked about as much.
That is so true, Dan, and you've summed it up very nicely. As you can imagine, we have a lot of opportunities to speak with leaders across the country about the program that we have here in Alabama. And it's interesting that when we met with Montana right before the pandemic, one of the questions that they were asking us after we did a presentation on all of the various components of our programs, they pretty much asked that, but what is truly the secret sauce? If we are having to take a look at all of these wonderful things you say that you're doing, what's the one thing you absolutely can't do without? And our entire leadership team, time and time again, continue to stress the coaching is the secret sauce. It's the glue that holds it all together, because not only is it coaching in the sense of you have someone that you can periodically speak with, but this is a job embedded coaching model that is undergirded around reflective supervision and reflective conversations. It's not just saying someone's going to pop in your classroom and observe. And I've been a principal and a teacher, so I know what that looks like and know what it on both ends doing it to people. But this is a model that really is about conversations and seeing everyone as a leader and building upon their strengths. And looking at ways that we can continue to confront any challenges and having a no excuses type approach. So the coaching piece really allows us to pull all of those other pieces together, because it's great that we have all the observation tools and we have leadership focus and all of those things, but without teachers getting what they need in those classrooms, the rest of it falls apart. So the coaching piece has to continue to be an area of focus. I think the department has demonstrated that it is an area of focus, and we continue to determine ways that we can model for all what shared leadership really means. And we do this from the top all the way down to our classrooms. Our leadership team meetings start on Monday mornings with mindfulness exercises where we're having conversations about what it means to be present, what it means to have reciprocal relationships, and all of those things, the types of interactions that make for a truly aligned department in a way that helps everyone to see that they are making an impact. And this is a way that you can have an even greater impact through this shared leadership model.
Now everyone knows Alabama's secret. You'll be getting lots of calls, as I know you already are, through the quality of the first class pre-K program. Let me just pause on a housekeeping note, just to let you know that in a couple minutes we're going to open up the conversation and would love to include some of your questions as well. So if you have questions for the panel, feel free to enter them in the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen, and we will try to pull from your questions here in just a few minutes. Judy, I wanted to turn back to you. I wanted to put in a plug for your great article here over the past week or two at our friends earlylearningnation.com, who do such a great job. But they had an article here recently that is sort of highlighted the same model that we're talking about in Alabama. And in it, you have this wonderful quote that I jotted down. I wanted to ask you about. You said, leadership is how you see yourself. It's your willingness to recognize and own the impact you have on others, and your commitment to support growth and increased effectiveness. Leadership is not defined by your role or your title. Talk to us a little bit about that. I was just so taken in particular by that last sentence. Leadership is not defined by your role or your title, because I think in so many settings, both within early childhood and outside, that we have these sort of hierarchical structures that, where position sort of speaks to to leadership in certain ways. Why is that the wrong approach in early childhood? And what do you mean when you say that it is not defined by your role?
Well, first of all, we know that traditionally leadership has been defined by power and hierarchy. I feel like I've collected innumerable observations over my pathway in this field. As a young teacher, I remember misbehaving in a staff meeting. And I was not planning on telling this story in this webinar, but I didn't like the retreat that my director had planned. And so I went down a very traditional bad girl route of behaving badly and bringing other people along in my bad behavior. Everybody's been in that. Not everybody has facilitated that situation, but everybody's been witness to it. And I had an extraordinary director, extraordinary leader, mentor. The next day, she brought me into her office and she said, "Judy, you have power and you get to decide how you want to use it. You were uncomfortable yesterday, and so you chose to act out. And people were uncomfortable because they like you and they didn't want to like the experience because they felt like you didn't like the experience." That was a turning point in my 20s. And then I noticed as I began to do more and more professional development around the country and overseas, that if there was somebody in that room who didn't like or didn't want to like what was happening, that person could use emotional contagion to get a whole lot of people to not like it. Is this resonating for people? And so I think if we sign the contract saying that we're going to be those people that shape the next generation of citizens, we can't sit on the sideline and say, "Just tell me what to do." And we can't sit on the sideline and say, "Well, I don't really like this, so I'm going to be negative." We have to own that it takes every single one of us to recognize the power we have to influence those around us. And, you asked the question about, like, how does it show up? Well, I feel like Amy's been part of one of the first study groups that we did around the book. And all of us were making jokes about how we think we're really good at nurturing relationships, or we really thought we were good at understanding self-awareness, until we start to challenge ourselves and we realize how much there is to learn. Or another teacher said to me, "I have a new understanding of how children pick up on my mood and how they can read my frame of mind. And as an optimistic leader, I have to be intentional when I enter my classroom." Joseph's nodding. That chemistry that we unconsciously project can make or break a child's day. So we can't afford to be unintentional. So the definition of leadership that I'm advocating our field embrace is that we are all leaders for children. Thanks for asking the question.
Well said. And I want to jump ahead. I mentioned we'd take some audience questions and still plan to do some more of them, here in just a couple of minutes. But Sarah asked an important question in the chat that maybe is something that I can open to all of you. Judy, you obviously sort of have helped to envision this model, but Amy, you're helping to make it happen in practice. She's asking, can we hear a little bit more about the actual coaching model itself? In terms of are there specific instructional practices that are being targeted, or specific strategies that are being used? Judy, maybe start by just saying a little bit more about what this looks like in practice.
It's interesting because I just got off the phone a little while ago with Tara Skiles, who is a part of Barbara's department and really a visionary when it comes to coaching. And, you know, like every other state, it's not like coaching started last Thursday. And lots of people have developed coaching models. And what's good about coaching models is when they offer a frame and the frame provides guidance for consistency. Alabama has been through, I mean, I was invited to Alabama, I think 15 or 18 years ago when I was first working on the Creative Curriculums coaching book before I wrote Coaching with Powerful Interactions. And what people wanted was kind of a how-to. As I mentioned before, the methods, the techniques. First you do this, then you do this, then you fill out this. The missing ingredient is who are you? What are your biases? Are you able to walk into a classroom and take your eyes off the two things you dislike and focus on all the myriad of things that are going well in that classroom? So Alabama has moved through a pathway and they have extracted some really excellent components from the reflective coaching model, from practice-based coaching. They chose to move to coaching with powerful interactions because of the emphasis on really looking for moments of effectiveness and a true asset-based approach. And I think where the state is now, which is really cutting edge, is bringing together people who are not just coaches to really say, how do we make this work at a system level B8? And there are teachers in the room, and there are Head Start staff in the room, and there are people from the university in the room, and there are teaching assistants and coaches. And we are examining, what does it take to not have this feel like somebody's being done to, but that people are working with. And so maybe I'll pause there, Amy, and let you pick up.
Well, I was thinking more about describing, was the question more maybe about a typical coaching visit and the model that we follow as we enter classrooms? Yes.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Amy, I think actually that might be really helpful for people to give an example of, you know, what a day in a life of a coach looks like, and what sorts of strategies are they sharing, interactions are they kind of participating in the classroom?
Well, just like in the classroom, Mr. Warren can attest to this, no visit ever looks the same, and we can always have our plan, and we're going to be flexible and adjust. But, you know, our visits are always going to include some type of focus observation that has been based on our previous visit and conversations with the teachers. And then we are going to have a reflection and feedback process, have a conversation about what we noticed, what we were focusing on in the observation, you know, what the teacher thought went well, what she thought could go better, what are we going to continue to work and grow on as we move to our next process. And then we're going to have some goal setting and action steps based on where the teacher wanted to take the feedback that we discussed during the day. And so in our goals and action plans, we're both going to have a part, because it is a partnership. The coach is going to have work that I'm going to do to support the teacher, and the teacher is going to have work to do in you know, in making this goal happen. Now, the work that the coach does, we always come through looking through our three main lenses. In our state, we're looking at teacher-child interactions, we're looking at child outcomes, and we're also looking, at the environment, you know, a DAP environment that's set up for the children to be successful. So all of our goals and action steps are always going to come back to those three lenses, and that's what we're looking through as we enter into the classrooms.
And Amy, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I'm misstating this, but it sounds like, you know, one of the differences here in creating these more equitable partnerships between coach and teacher you described how after that focus observation, the teacher has the opportunity to reflect on what went well and what he or she would like to improve. It's not a matter of the coach sort of serving in an evaluator role and stepping in to say, well, here's, I noticed this problem, I noticed that problem, but really allowing the teacher to reflect on that and, kind of jointly, brainstorming, what might be done to strengthen those areas.
Absolutely. And thinking about what does she want to have happen and why is that important? And, the focus observations can also look very different depending on what the teacher's working on and also her preference. We're not always sitting in a corner with a notepad. Maybe we're modeling something that the teacher's asked and she's going to be observing, and we're going to have conversations about what she noticed and what she would like to implement. We can also do recordings. I think the power of recording and watching it together, that has produced some beautiful coaching conversations because she's also now the owner of what she's noticing in her practices rather than it just being what I noticed about her practices. So the observations, can be set up in a variety of ways depending on the teacher's goals and what they're comfortable with and the strengths that they've identified.
That's great. Joseph, jump in and share your perspective on this. Obviously, Amy's looking at it kind of from the coaching of the coaches. You're in the other role as the teacher in the classroom who's working with a coach. What have you found especially effective about this kind of model of coaching and interaction in your classroom?
And so I can echo with Miss Amy that the coach is never looking at the same quality when they come. It's always something different that they're enhancing and coaching you on. Like my last site visit with my coach, we was doing a virtual live because we were doing our platform with our live. And like Miss Amy was saying, she did more recording because I was doing the platform of face-to-face and virtual learning. And we took the kids on a virtual trip. And I was there to take my kids on the virtual kids and the face-to-face kids all on that virtual trip. And it was like we was all there together and we was bonding. So like Miss Amy was saying, my bond with my coach is very, very enhancing because she's always giving us feedback. She's always there to step in and model, and sometimes she's like, it's like a joy when she come because sometimes she was saying you went to another level that I thought I was going to get, and she got something different. So coaching on as a teacher aspect is very, very, I would say, personal. If my coach come in and it's just like we're family. And it's now another dull moment. She's always there to keep us. I said sometimes she's doing her observing, but she's just like part of the class, like the third teacher.
That's great. And
I was just going to ask and add to that, Mr. Warren. So when we were talking about observations, I'm sure that you always, and I'm curious too, do you feel like she is looking for strengths or weaknesses as she enters your classroom?
She always said, I give her a wow moment. So she would say,
effectiveness, yes.
She's looking for strength, but sometimes she said, oh, you just gave me a wow moment that I can go back, and she does a lot of pre-recording and she can take and model with the other classrooms, her other class sites.
One of the questions, Dan, in the Q&A was about the possibility of seeing the model. And I wrote an answer saying that on Leading for Children's website, on the resources page, there are some of the examples of coaching in action from Alabama. And you can see Amy and Joseph and many other of the state's coaches in action. And I think you get a real sense of those reciprocal partnerships, the fact that there's real balance between the voices and that the coach sees herself or himself as holding up a mirror so that the teacher becomes more cognizant of her competence or his competence, because when we don't often know what we do right, but when we see or hear or talk about what we're doing right, we get to do it more.
And Dan, I would add to that, what Judy, Joseph, and Amy have shared are things that we have an opportunity to actually observe when we go in those classrooms. Just last week, I had an opportunity to visit a first class pre-K classroom and had an interaction with both the coach and the teacher. And to just hear the coach talk about how they're learning from the teacher and how hear the teacher talk about how they're learning from the coach, it's almost unheard of, because usually you have this hierarchy where the coach thinks that they're the carrier of the knowledge and they're imparting it onto the teacher. But to hear that reciprocal relationship, I think gets at the essence of what we're trying to accomplish here with optimistic leadership, and that leadership occurs at every level, and all of those perspectives matter, and we learn from one another.
You know, one thing I would want to add is that there's tremendous intentionality right now about how the department is both providing professional learning for coaches and also thinking about the ways that they want to refine their coaching system so that it works B8. And the first I would say is that they've shifted to a lot more small group conversations, co-coaching groups, especially during the pandemic, more intensive conversations about a particular concept. We worked in collaboration with a diverse group of educators to shape some coach competencies. So there are many, many factors that are playing in right now to the innovation that is happening in Alabama. And of course, Leading for Children is really grateful to be learning with and from our partners in Alabama. And I think that what I would want to convey to listeners is they haven't adopted a package, that what you've been doing is learning something and adapting it, and then looking for what's missing or what you're looking for next. And there's such an intentional pathway. And now, I mean, I've never seen this anywhere else in the country, bringing together people across roles and across agencies to say, if this is going to work statewide and really be the lever for professional learning, what are all the things we have to be thinking about?
We've got a whole list of really good, important questions in the chat. So I want to get to those in just a minute. But one more thing I wanted to ask quickly before we do that. Joseph, we've talked a lot about the kind of the shared, leadership between adults, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about the coach-teacher interaction, but I'm just curious to hear from you how that plays out in your classroom. Then, how do you apply these same kinds of ideas to sharing leadership with the children that you are working with in the classroom?
To share the platform with my kids is from day one. We build that bond, that community up. And I let them get the sense of each other the first couple of months of school. And it's an ongoing, because we give those children opportunities to have jobs. They have jobs every week to help promote each other. And like doing whole group, we give them the opportunity to perform those jobs. Like on a daily basis, I have a meteorologist, I have a teacher assistant. They step up and they lead the conversation. They lead from previous learning, that experience from home, getting an opportunity to come back and the voice of what they have done at home, and like particular day over weather. And it's ongoing, and give those kids that platform. And it's ongoing from arrival all the way to the transition home. And the kids really love it, creating those jobs and bond, because my classroom was a model conscious discipline classroom. And I found out when you let the children voice be counted with each other, they can really, really self-regulate their problems themselves. You can just sit back and they'll self-regulate their problems. And you can just do more watching like, okay, they're really getting it. And it's very, very, to me, I had my conscious discipline coach because we did a lot of virtual this year. And I was telling her, I don't have any problem, no discipline problem, because they learn how to regulate their problems themselves.
That's terrific. Conscious discipline is a wonderful, wonderful program. But let's jump to some of these questions in the chat. And I recognize our time is starting to run a little bit short, so we'll try to maybe get to as many of these as we can in kind of a brief way. Secretary, I think this is probably a good question for you to tackle. Linda is asking, just sort of logistically, how are the coaches trained and how are they paid? I'm assuming that that the department employs coaches as part of the state's funding of the first class pre-K program. Is that right?
That is correct. We have a little over 100 coaches, and they are out in all of our 8 regions of Alabama. They receive intensive training. You heard Judy talk about the Alabama Reflective Coaching Model and all of the many tools and the things that we're doing through coaching with powerful interaction. So all of these are the components of the coaching model. And then they do monthly coaching clusters where they actually have opportunities to go deeper in the reflective supervision and the other strategies that are being implemented as part of the coaching model. But yes, it's funded through our state funds, and it's dependent upon how many classrooms are actually in each region. Each coach has a coaching load. We have both full-time as well as part-time coaches, and again, their loads are determined by whether or not they're full or part-time, but we reevaluate it every year. We try to keep coaches with the teachers they've been serving, but of course, sometimes as you have growth, as we'll add almost 175 classrooms this year, we'll have additional coaches that we'll bring on board, and so we'll have to do some juggling of coaching loads and things of that sort.
I just want to pause on the point that you just made, the Secretary Cooper. I think, it is so, just to reflect for a moment on the fact that you have 100 coaches that are working in first class pre-K around the state. I think as policymakers are looking at state level implementation, that's an area that would be very easily overlooked by states. And I think, to me, one of the great ingredients, as we talked about sort of the secret sauce to Alabama's quality implementation, but having the supports in place to work with teachers, to lift up teachers, to make sure that quality is there is so important. And yes, there's an administrative cost associated with having a structure like that, but boy, the way that expenditure amplifies all of the rest of the program probably can't be overstated.
That's correct, Dan. And as we've indicated, we make it a priority. Having coaches is non-negotiable. But I think another piece that's critical is that we also have a monitor that is assigned to each classroom. So our coaches never have to veer into the compliance role or making sure that all of the guidelines are being adhered to in terms of things like the number of toys and books and things that should be in a classroom. The monitor is able to really address those compliance issues, which keeps the coach able to have a real pure relationship with their teachers that they're serving.
I'm so glad you clarified that, Secretary, because that was actually a very similar to a question that's in the chat about sort of the distinction between coaches and the enforcement of kind of safety and programmatic standards. So those are really 2 different roles, that there's a monitor and there's a coach.
And also a regional director for all of the 8 regions. So yes, we have various levels that are able to come together to really make sure that comprehensive support and focus on continuous quality improvement is able to be a part of the program.
And then another logistical question, Secretary, that you're good for here is who are the coaches? Are they early childhood educators? What are the qualifications of the coaches?
Yes, our coaches are previous early childhood educators. Most of our coaches have been teachers in our classrooms. Again, I think that speaks to the power of the model as well. What more beneficial is it to have that person coaching you and supporting you who have actually walked in your shoes? So having that additional understanding of what it really means to be a first-class pre-K teacher, because you've been a first-class pre-K teacher, certainly has been very beneficial to strengthening the model as well. But yes, they have to have early childhood education credentials and background.
And Amy, let me turn to you for this next one. Donnie is asking, what did the process look like for the team of coaches as you moved from this sort of fix-it approach to coaching now to this more strength-based model? How did you get the buy-in, for example, from the coaches to sort of make this fundamental shift in how they were approaching their work?
Well, again, I was lucky enough to begin as we shifted to this strength-based approach. Previously, I was in a first-class pre-K classroom, and I can never say enough about my time in the classroom and what it did for me as a teacher and as a believer for being an advocate for young children. It was my favorite place. I never thought I would leave, but I wanted to do great things for young children. And so thinking about the shift, I think the biggest hurdle is a lot of times we think that fixing it kind of gives an instant result, maybe, and you feel like you're doing something right then and in the moment, and it's something that's holdable, and you're also in control of it. And so I think the hardest thing is to just shift away from holding that control and giving the power over, because what if they never get to what I think they need to work on? Or what if they never make the shift that I think is most important? And that's when I also believe the optimistic leadership commitments have been really come into play in the work that I'm doing with coaches who are, I think they have the buy-in, they're just a little timid. You know, trying something new, trying a new way is always scary, but activating curiosity, you know, understanding their thinking, coming in without judgment. When you activate your curiosity, you set judgment aside because you really want to understand where that person is coming from and what their thinking is. And so when I model that and these coaches feel that, they understand how they can go and do that with their teachers as well.
You're on mute now, Dan.
Sorry about that. Two other questions.
Today, isn't it? The webinar is you're on mute.
The new phrase in the world here is you're on mute. So two quick questions. I know we're almost out of time, but you know, one, Judy, maybe I can throw this to you. You know, attendee is asking, what can be done in a program when maybe the management or the coordinators of the program are actually involved in creating some of the negativity in the workplace? Maybe we need an hour for that.
We do need an hour for that. And that's actually the mission of Leading for Children. You know, I think that, again, Dr. Cooper and Alabama has made it possible for us to experiment with what we call the ecosystem learning network. That one of the learning networks we're doing in Alabama is just with coaches. And it's a deeper dive into this strength-based approach to coaching and using the Alabama competencies. But the next thing we're experimenting with is what happens when we bring all the different roles together into the same space. The senior leadership, the coaches, parents, as we did in Mississippi and Wyoming. We just bring all these adults in the child's ecosystem to explore the power of having a climate and a culture of relationships and interactions that work. You know, I think that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to have bad behavior. But we have bad behavior when we're living under stress. And the higher up you are in responsibility, the more weight there is on your shoulders, and often the less opportunity you have to pause and think before you speak. But the same thing is true when a classroom teacher has 18 children and they all have different needs. that's when he or she doesn't show up at her best. If you put all those people together in a conversation, suddenly they find areas of commonality. Oh, that happens in my family when I just get in from work and somebody demands something from me, or that happens in my office, and suddenly there's humanity. So I don't think we can change the culture of coaching without looking at the relationships in this ecosystem. And that's why it's very exciting what we've just embarked on, to say, let's hear from all the voices in all the diverse agencies about what it would take to really successfully use coaching as a lever for equity and for quality.
I think that's a great place for us to pause and probably wrap up our conversation this afternoon. I want to thank our panel. What a great conversation, and just another reason that Alabama's First Class Pre-K program is one that, you know, all of you watching across the country, I would definitely commend to your attention as a model to be looking at. And congratulations, Secretary Cooper and Amy and Joseph, for your role in helping to make things so great in the program in Alabama, and to Judy. Dr. Barbara Cooper, Secretary of the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education. Judy Jablon is the Executive Director of Leading for Children. Joseph Warren is teacher at the Alabama Organized Community Action Program. And Amy Brooks, Coach Facilitator at the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education. We're so glad to have all of you with us today, and thank you for taking the time out to join us. I do want to quickly see if I can pull this up. I want to mention to you all our next, well, I cannot screen share, but I will tell you that our next Early Efforts webinar will be happening in early July, on July 6th, Tuesday, July 6th, so just after the holiday weekend at 2 p.m. Eastern. We will be talking about infusing equity across early childhood state systems. We're very excited to be hosting this particular session in partnership with the National Association of Early Childhood Specialists in State Departments of Education. And we'll be talking with Department of Education early childhood leaders from Arizona, from Maryland, and from Alabama. And so we are excited to be sharing that conversation. You can look for registration information coming here very shortly, but that is on Tuesday, July 6th at 2 p.m. Again, to our panel, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and as much so, if not more so, to all of you who have taken the time out of your day to tune in and participate in this conversation. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again in July.
Thank you, Dan.
Everyone.